if you're looking for information about Power BI, or you're looking about DAX, or anything like that, I know something about DAX, I know obviously something about Power BI, but this topic is more about the science and the art of dashboard design, right? And it's really about communication. And what are the different modes of communication that we have? When we are a child, we learn to speak. It's called Oracy. As we grew up, we went into school, we learned to read and write. And that's called literacy, right? And then if you get into the field of analysis, data science, whatever, you learn to communicate about numbers, right? And numbers and data, they have shapes. And that's numeracy. And yet we're at a phase where we don't just present the reams and reams of data. I'm old enough to remember the green bar sheets of paper, right? Just reams of data, numbers. We talk in pictures. Graphicacy. The ability to communicate efficiently and effectively using visualizations. And so the topic here is to introduce, and many of them you probably already know, but just a summary, introduce commonly accepted norms of articulate communication via graphicacy. Now, visualizations has been around for about 230 years. A guy named William Playfair, back in 1786, came out with a little booklet of the different visualizations that he compiled. Right, this is one of them from his book, right, from this little booklet, and he's commonly referred to as the father of data visualization. So this came out in 1786. Highly respected. The only bad thing he ever did was create the pie chart. But other than that, he's really good. And today, data visualization is not just about dashboards, even though that's the context that I'm going to be speaking on, is visualizations within a dashboard. But if you're interested in the larger topic, then Colin Ware's book, Information Visualization, is the Bible on this topic. He doesn't get into bar charts, column charts, etc. He gets into almost the biology of why something is a good visualization compared to something else. And data visualization, it isn't just charts. But if we think about it, virtual reality is data visualization. Simulators, like aircraft simulators, are visualizations. And he is the, like I said, this is the Bible for that type of research. So my passion is really about business intelligence and the role of business intelligence. A lot of people, let me just cut to the chase. What is the role of business intelligence? What is the purpose? The purpose of business intelligence is the use of data to influence human behavior towards a desired result or improved results. That's the goal. It isn't just to create pretty pictures because I can and because I'm artistic. We want it to be read by someone and we want it to be used by someone. Why? Because we work for a company and we want to contribute to the betterment of that company. Not just receive a paycheck and waste my time, but to really use data to influence behavior towards a better result. And that leads to the statement, the data doesn't matter unless the data matters to someone. And that's really the key point of being in business intelligence. You know, in biology, there's something called the corpus callosum, right? It's that middle part of your brain that connects the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The people that are only about the databases and the networks and the hardware, right? And the ETL processes, right? And you've got the right hemisphere of people that I've got a job to do and I need information to do my job. And business intelligence is that corpus callosum that interfaces the two together, right? And it doesn't do you any good, and it doesn't do anyone any good if you're sending data across the hemispheres that the right side really doesn't want to know or really doesn't care about. So it behooves us in business intelligence to understand what is the business use, the business need, what drives the business, and make key performance indicators truly key performance indicators. And so in this context, or in this paradigm, you've got the IT department. They collect the data, like I said, they maintain the databases, they secure the data so that there's no, well, can't say no, infrequent data breaches, right? You've got the users over here, and then you've got the BI department, which translates data into usable information so that people in operations can gain insight and guide the company in a preferred way, right? And that's where I feel that BI has its niche and adds value to be that connector. Right? But there's lots of roles that anyone interested in numbers and data can be involved in. My background, I mentioned before, I was a founder of a company, co-founder of a company, but I was an accountant, CFO, that kind of thing. So you can see the accountant is there. You can be a scientist involved with R. I have known nothing about R, and I have no interest in knowing anything about R, but some people do, right? So there's lots of different areas to be involved in with data and the analysis of data. What I'm going to be speaking on, none of this is, well, little of this is my own thought, right? I'm a big fan of Stephen Few and the books that he's written primarily on dashboard design. And this book here, Information Dashboard Design, it's a great book. A lot of the things that I'm going to be shown, I literally copy and pasted out of a digital version I have of this book. So it's not coming from me, this guy. It's coming from a recognized authority. Right? So what are some examples of dashboards that are already out there? I literally had a leader, we were talking about dashboards, and he literally said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to Google dashboards and see what's out there and copy those examples, right? And here I am, I've read lots and lots of books on the subject, and here he is talking about Googling examples as though those are going to be the best cases, right? So let me show you some of the cases that you might find if you Google dashboards.
Yes. Nice.
Oh God.
Exactly, right? I mean, normally I go into this and I really thrash these things apart, but we have time, time limitations. But just because you see it doesn't mean it's good, right? Just because you read a book doesn't mean it's a good book, right? Here, oh my gosh, look at that. I mean, so creative. All sorts of different colors. We've got three-dimensional pie charts. We've got column charts that appear to be cylinders because they got all that highlighting there. And I can't forget the gauges up there in the upper left. And the company I work with is not immune to bad design. This is one of our reports that was not anymore. That was provided weekly to the CFO of the company, and it's just like, oh, seriously? I'm not the author of that, by the way. Yeah.
What's a flash?
Oh, Flash. Flash is so Audigy is like I said, it's a management advisory firm. We specialize in advising audiologists, hearing aid doctors, and the economics behind the company is a buying group, so there's a rebate or a commission based on sales, and the Flash is a weekly update of unit sales. Cute displays of gauges and traffic lights and meters. After a while, and it doesn't take very long, after a while you get really tired of looking at that art because that's not your job. What you're interested in is the information. And so effective dashboard design is more about science than it is about art, because it's about effective communication. Now, I'm going to show you a slide, not next, but I'm going to show you a slide later in the deck, and I'm going to make the point, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because the software has that feature, it doesn't mean you should use it, right? It may look artsy, but it's not effective.
That's how some people feel about comments.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah. So, what is a dashboard? And what is the component of a dashboard? I like to say that dashboard design, it goes through 3 phases. The formation level is, I want to see pretty charts that pop. I literally had a vice president tell me, I want to see this pop. Didn't say anything about what the chart was about. It was just she wanted to see it pop. And I don't necessarily put that down, but it's not about information communication as much as it is creative marketing, right? You've got this really fancy chart, it catches the eye. Nobody pays attention to what it's actually trying to communicate, but it's eye candy, right? So you give that to them for a while, and they get used to seeing something. And then they come back to you, and they say, I want to see everything. I want to see one report, and I want to see all the numbers on this one report. Has anybody seen this before? Anybody asked for this? Yes, of course. They want to see all the numbers all at once. And I know you guys are younger than me, but does anybody remember the first Star Trek movie? Star Trek 1? Remember V'ger? right?
The one that was a bad rewrite of the TV show.
It's
Yeah.
Or a TV
of
episode.
traveling through cube graphics.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those that haven't seen it, Beecher was this, you know, it's coming to this, it's this thing in space, it's coming to Earth, and it's destroying planets and all of this. And so they go on to this big spaceship that it's become, and it refers to itself as Beecher, right? And spoiler alert, towards the end of the movie, you find out that Beecher is actually one of the Voyager spacecrafts, right? And it's been corrupted, now it calls itself Beecher, right? And the story is that Voyager was sent out into space to collect information. And it went on its happy way forever and ever. And it collected so much information, it became self-aware. It became, in a sense, a living thing. And that's what people at the growth level expect. When they ask you, I want to see everything all at once, what they're expecting is the ability to take in all this data and somehow, like the beautiful mind, start making connections between the numbers and illumination of understanding. But what really happens when you give them that big report that has all the numbers, what really happens is greater confusion. More data, more information equals more confusion. So finally you come to the completion level of data design. And finally they say, I only want to see the information that's important. I want to see it simply, and I want to see why it's important. And what they're asking for there is focused orientation towards performance, because their job is to better perform. And they need you to cut out the clutter and only show them what's important. And that's where I'm coming back to this left brain, right brain, you're the corpus callosum. You have to understand what's important to them and why it's important, and be able to articulate that understanding in a visual or through graphicacy. So Stephen Few says, a dashboard is a visual display of information needed to achieve one or more objectives on a single screen so that they can see it at a glance and understand what it's saying, right? So I'm going to run through quickly some common mistakes that I've created, others have created, that Stephen Few also highlights so that you can avoid them. Or if you see somebody else's, not yours, somebody else's design, you can critique it and say, well, I would have done it this way, it better performs. This one, I'm going to not talk about the gauges at the moment. But you'll notice on the right, there's a scroll bar. And one of the definitions of a dashboard is on one page, right? Scroll, it's kind of like the newspaper. Nobody reads below the fold, right? If it's important, put it above the fold. So that. Here, I've just got to point this out. I just, you know, I love McKinsey Consulting Group. I think they're a fantastic consulting group. But they actually published a paper, and this visual on the right, that was one of the graphs. I have no idea what it means. It wasn't explained in the article. Something about artificial intelligence, and you've got idlers, isolators, and integrators, and it says 58%. I have no idea what the 58% means because it's not a sum of the individual, right? 25 and 16 is 41 plus 10, that's 51. So it's not that. So it kind of looks cool, but I have no idea what it means. And same with the ones in the upper left. 7,822 units year to date. This isn't Audigy, this is something else. I don't know, is that good or bad? I don't know. It's a number, but there's no context.
And does it max out at some number as well?
Yeah, is it a logarithmic scale? Is it linear scale? I don't know. Just here, this one, they're providing what appears to be excessive detail, especially if you look down at the bottom right. Do you really need all those decimal places?
Yeah, 11 digits.
Yeah. Because something might happen. You know, in accounting, we always, in accounting you work with numbers all the time, right? And, something's going to be out of balance or something's not going to be exactly right. But then the question is it material? Is the variance material? And I would be hard pressed to hear the argument that says 8 or 9 decimal places is a material level of granularity, right? I really don't think so. But, and I'll be getting to it later, when your eye is looking at that, your eye doesn't know the difference. It's looking at all the zeros. And it's trying to figure out which one's important and which one's not important. So in a sense, you've got a lot of cycles going on, trying to figure something out that's not important. But you don't know it's not important until you spend the time looking at it. Does that make sense? If you're going to have a chart that says you're looking at the variance, then maybe show the variance instead of showing the actual and the budget. Therefore, you have to figure out the variance, right? So be careful about what it is you're saying you're going to present, and then present that, right? And that's what the bottom right does. It shows the variance as the movement up and above the target, if you will. And of course, who can forget the three-dimensional pie chart that everybody loves so much?
Don't use pie charts.
Don't use pie charts. Someone asked
Sorry,
me
Ron.
when I was giving this presentation to someone, another group, they asked me, is there any situation where you would use a pie chart? And my answer was no.
Why does Power BI even have the option?
But just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right, there we
Right?
go.
There is one redeeming factor, even though William Playfair developed it in 1801. Okay, there is one redeeming factor of a pie chart. When you see a pie chart, you immediately know it's about percentages of a whole, right? You immediately know that's what a pie chart's for, right? But as you can see here in the bar chart, there's more effective ways of presenting that same information. Because I really want to go over there and show this, but Trevor told me to stay behind the podium here. In Colin Ware's book about information visualization, that Bible, he talks about the mind's ability, and the mind is very able to determine the difference in lengths or widths, right? We're really good at that. Determining the difference in area or angles, yeah, we're not so good at that. So that's the weakness of the pie chart, is it relies upon you to figure out which angle is greater, which area is greater. And you just have to work too hard at it. Whereas a bar chart's much more effective. This is the potpourri of visualizations, right? You've got a gauge, you've got some things. I don't know exactly what those are for. You've got color coding at the bottom there. One of the points is, you see the horizontal lines for the column chart there? You see how heavy those lines are? Well, those lines have a visual weight, and they don't need to be that heavy. It's a distraction to the column, right? So we'll get into the good side of visualization, but every element on your chart, if you're attempting to be eloquent in your visualization, eloquent, that's a great word, because it speaks about simple and effective communication. So if you're attempting to be eloquent, think about everything you're putting on that chart. Does it need to be there? If it does need to be there, is it the primary focus, or is it more background for the purpose of setting context?
Looks like Barbados is really important. And then you go down and say they had 31 sales.
Yeah. Here, again, the pie chart, but they didn't even bother telling you, putting the numbers for the pie chart next to the wedges. They put it in the legend. So now you have to keep going back and forth between the legend and the pie chart to see which one's which, right? And this bar chart on the bottom right, well, first of all, it's three-dimensional, and again, you can imagine my feelings about three-dimensional charts. And look at all that background noise in the background there. Yes, okay, you can call it artsy, you can call it creative, I was feeling bored, but it detracts from the message, right? And it just simply that, it detracts from what you're trying to communicate. And the shading there, the gradient shading, what's the point, right? Oh, this one. Yeah, Brian knows this one. I'm sorry, Trevor, I have to move to this one. I apologize.
This is the political cartoon.
So, why don't you take a look at, let's say, this one right here, right? So you've got this chart column, you've got this column, right? So don't look at the axis here. And the question is, how much larger is this column than this column? How much larger is it?
2.5 times.
You know, maybe, let me see, 1, 2, call it 3. That's reasonable, right? It's about 3 times larger until you look at the axis. And then you realize this one, maybe just call it 700,000, roughly. This one, about 1.150, right? So it's less than 2 times. It's less than 2 times larger than this, but it looks so much bigger because they didn't start at 0. And somebody said about political charts, that's exactly what you'll find sometimes in, some opinion piece. They'll show you a chart, but take a look really carefully at what the chart's showing and see if it starts at 0, because this blows up the distortion or the difference between the two. Chart should start at 0. And this one is just arranged really poorly. It's a sales, dashboard. And if you look at everything that's displayed, over one quarter of the dashboard, lower right, is devoted to returns. I mean, I don't know, maybe they have really bad returns and it deserves that much attention. But generally, if it's a sales dashboard, you want the focus to be on sales, right? And this one has all sorts of things going on. And this somebody just, they really went creative on this. I don't know, maybe if it were a visual representation of an actual machine, then it might make sense. But the way it's displayed here is just way too complex for the mind to understand at a glance what it is you're trying to communicate. And this one too. So why is it that what made those such stellar examples of poor design, right? Well, we come back to Colin Ware's book, and he talks about 3 different levels of memory. You have iconic memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Iconic memory is you see it and you understand it before you think. You just visually, your mind gets it. And I'll give an example in just a bit. Without thinking, you understand the difference. Short-term memory is temporary. It usually your short-term memory can take in about 3 to 9 different graphs or objects at once. But short-term memory only lasts about 20 seconds, right? And you're thinking about what it is you're seeing. Long-term memory is, you remember everything. But the problem with long-term memory is you don't remember everything. You remember snippets. And it's hard to recall what you've remembered. Easy example. How many people can remember what they had for lunch 2 days ago? No. You probably could if you really tried. Think about it. You try to think about a scenario. Oh, let me think. Where was I 2 days ago? I was over there. Oh, that's right. I went over here and yeah, I ordered that. Right? You could think it through, but it's too hard. Right? So, let me give you an example of iconic memory. So, easy test. Give you a couple of seconds. How many 5s are there in this display? And if you've already seen this before, probably Brian has. But how many 5s are there? Don't shout it out. Just give you a few minutes, a few seconds here. How many 5s? Okay. Now, how many 5s are there?
23?
20.
2 times 30.
Nothing changed. Nothing changed in the sequence of the numbers. The only thing that changed were the 5s were bolded, i.e., there was something different about them that seeing a 5, you immediately saw it. You didn't have to think, is that a 5? Your eye immediately went to it. Now, counting the number of 5s, that's short-term memory, right? You had to remember there was a 1 over here, this is a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? But that's a really important thing for when we're designing a dashboard. Not everything is equal, right? And so in his book, Stephen Pugh highlights these different ways that the eye notices something's different. Maybe the length is longer, like a column chart. Maybe the shape is larger, like a scatter plot, right? Or maybe the orientation is different. You've got all these, in a scatter plot, you've got this cluster, and then you've got a couple of dots over here, the outliers, right? your eye probably goes to the outliers trying to figure out what's different about them. How come they're not with the rest of the group, right? So these are different encoding methods that you can use in a dashboard to call out what's important. A lot of times people will use color, right? They'll use a red to call out something that your eye really wants to pay attention to. So, what are some of the guiding principles behind effective dashboard design? Because again, don't you want, there's something called the author's paradox. Has anybody heard the author's paradox? Something's called the author's paradox. You've got this author, right? Goes through and he writes this book. It's a nonfiction book, right? So it's not about lovers or anything like that. It's some instructional material, right? He goes through and he researches for a couple of years to write this book. And he gets the book published. People buy the book. It becomes a bestseller. He makes a lot of money. And nothing changes. They read the book. They understood the book. But they didn't do anything differently. And so for the writer, it's kind of like, I really researched this topic. I really tried to communicate it as effectively as I could. I really wanted people to,
Not to move tech support. Bring in tech support.
I really wanted people to pay attention to what I was doing. Okay. Thanks. Oh,
And we're back.
perfect. Thanks. So this is what I'm trying to get across, is that you go through so much work, and I really want your work to be helpful to somebody, versus I did the chart because they asked me to do it. I really want your work to have impact, right? And so the guiding principle is simplicity. Make things as clearly and simply understandable as possible, and avoid using unnecessary and distracting decoration, right? Like, you know, I'll get to it in just a bit, but there's really only three elements you need to use. I know you're going to say it's boring, but are you trying to create creative marketing, or are you trying to be an effective communicator? Points, lines, and boxes. That's it. Points, lines, and boxes is what you can use to communicate in a dashboard, right?
You had a Dilbert chart in there, didn't you? Height versus salary.
So, first is about color. The eye goes towards what the bold, right? And that's, not everything is equal. So, put what's important in a bold color and have its context in muted colors. Right, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally right. So it's about points, lines, and boxes, or bars. It may look boring, but I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Edward Tufte or if it was Hans Rosling. He said, if the statistics you're looking at are boring, you're looking at the wrong numbers. Because it's not supposed to be entertaining, it's supposed to be informative. And like I said earlier, the data isn't important unless it's important to someone. And so, effective communication. This is a dashboard taken from Stephen Few. And you'll see it, that's exactly what he does. There's a lot of information here. He's got lines, he's got columns, he's got a bullet graph there in the top middle. He's got red dots to pull your eye. Oh, that's something different. What's different about that? I ought to pay attention to that because it's different, right? And there is a place for just numbers, like in the lower right-hand corner, the data table. A table of numbers is appropriate if the level of detail is needed, right? If the shape isn't enough, you actually want to see the exact number. Or if you've got a long list, then a data table is effective. Because if you try to have a line chart with all these names on it, these top 10 customers, it would just be spaghetti, right? And finally, that column chart that my company, or the company I work for, put out, it can be more pleasingly presented in this visualization on the right. So simplicity. Think about data visualization as articulate communication, eloquent communication using graphs. And a dashboard, in that sense, a dashboard is nothing more than a page of eloquent information in the form of charts, much like a poem or a page of a book, right? You can tell a well-written book versus a poorly written book by the way it's phrased, by the way it's presented. So, thank you.
Awesome. Oh, you have some questions, Ron?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Ron, I realize that these tools could be intended for a wide audience, but it seems like most of the time, in my experience, they're intended for a specific audience. And one of the things I didn't hear you talk about was understanding the audience, like understanding their traditions, their nomenclature, their language, in going about designing visualization tools. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I tried to touch on that. Obviously I wasn't effective, but I tried.
I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, it's okay. I tried to touch on that when I talked about we're like the corpus callosum of the brain, and the audience is the right-hand side, right? You've got the owners, you've got they're not in the business of saving, collecting, storing, securing data. And they really don't have the time or the desire to visualize that data. They've got a business to run. They've got a department to run. They've got targets to reach. And therefore, it's our job to understand the audience, to understand their context, so that we give them the data that's important to them.
Well, the only reason why I asked that is that some of the examples you gave might be appropriate for the right kind of audience. No?
I would be interested to hear the argument for that, because the illustrations there that I gave of poor design, an overriding theme, there was two. An overriding theme was unnecessary complexity and distractions. There was too much going on, i.e. too many different types of charts, and there was too much background noise. And again, we want to be eloquent and understand at a glance what it is. I mean, if they get into studying, then that's great. But most people, their job is, you're going to tell me some information. Tell me what it is so that I can do my job.
So Ron,
Yeah.
what I didn't see in sort of best practices is use of specific colors to communicate certain things, right? Which is very culturally specific, right?
Oh, very much. you know, one of my best friends is Xin Yu, who's Chinese. And in America, red means danger, right? Because red is the color of blood, right? Danger, danger, Will Robinson, right? In China, red means life, because the color of blood is red. So therefore, red means life. You know, MGM created this huge casino. You know this story, right?
Yes.
MGM created this huge casino in Las Vegas. I mean, it's like monstrous, right? And of course, MGM is the lion, right? So they put this huge lion's head as the door, as the entrance to go into the casino, right? And of course, any casino, they want to attract the whales, you know, the people that are going to drop lots of money. And a lot of those whales are Chinese. But the Chinese would never go to the MGM hotel. Why? Because the lion is a symbol of bad luck in Chinese culture.
And you had to walk through his mouth to get there.
And you had to walk through the mouth to get there. So yeah, cultural awareness, yeah, very important.
Yeah, I heard an
my
example.
company's, huh?
I was just saying, I heard an example of a research study that was studying placebo effect on sleeping, and they found this outlier in Italy. They were like, why are these blue pills making everyone sleepy? They're studying the colors of pills, and it was because blue, I guess, is the sports team in Italy, and it was invigorating to see blue. So it actually didn't cause them to feel sleepy compared to the rest of the world. Another example.
Yeah. My, the company I work for, its company color is purple. So I try to use purple as the line or the bar for good news, right? To reinforce, oh, this is you, right? This is, pay attention, this is you, this is everybody else. You're doing good, make it purple. So, like that. Yeah.
How does animation and interactivity fit in your story?
Oh, excellent. Really good question. So the context of this was a dashboard, right? Versus some animated display. But even if you take a look at like Hans Rosling's animated visualization of World Health, right? It's very famous. He still uses very simple objects for his visualization. They simply move around. So I don't have a problem with visualizations as long as it's kept simple and there's a reason for it. Much like the three-dimensional, yeah, there's a reason maybe for three-dimensional if that third dimension has some purpose, right? But if it's only three-dimensional because it looks cool, then it doesn't have a real need. But animation, absolutely, if it serves a purpose, like changes over time, something like that, totally.
I think to add to the interactivity portion of that, too,
Yeah.
and to bring it back to Power BI, I found that like time sequences are generally best as a line chart from a visualization standpoint. From an interactivity standpoint, in Power BI, you can't click a line dot and have it filter other visuals. So sometimes you have to sacrifice the best practice to make the interactivity possible between visuals. So sometimes they collide with each other.
There's another principle too that, speaking of Timothy's excellent book, one of the principles in there which that collides with Power BI sometimes, or at least depending on how we use it, you shouldn't have to click anything to get useful information from your report. So if when somebody pulls up your report, they have to do 4 mouse clicks before something useful pops up, you haven't done your job.
Right.
So interactivity is great, but you shouldn't have to interact with your chart to be able to get useful information.
Yeah. There's a great book, and I know you have a question, so I'll get to you in just a second. There's a great book out there. It's about web design, right? But the title is so great. Don't make me think, right? That's so perfect, right? And it's about user interaction, user interface. Don't make me think about what I'm supposed to do. It should be intuitive. Yeah.
So I was actually just going to make a comment about you know, he was mentioning that what if your audience wants all of that detail and everything like that? And I think that opens the door to what really needs to happen is the visual designer has to collaborate with the owner to really figure out what works for them, because what might work for the finance department won't work for the marketing department. Marketing likes to see word clouds. Well, financial department is not going to want to see a word cloud or a number cloud, right? So I think that's where the designer has to collaborate with the business owner to find out what works for them.
Yeah.
But using these guidelines to have, you know, using soft colors, you know how to show it. You just need to know what you want, what you need to show.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he made a point though, and I've seen this often, you know, where the sophistication of your user may be here, and you know eventually they will get here, right? And so when you try to start here, but they're here, maybe, you know, they haven't caught up, right? So, you know, the customer is not always right, but the customer is always the customer.
Right.
So I mean, like, you know, in that sense, you can.
That's a good. Sorry, Ron. That's a really great point. The customer is not always right, but it's always the customer that pays. So yeah, that's a good point. You have to be sensitive to what it is they want, but I think that's part of a. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. In one sense, as the visual designer, as the dashboard designer, in one sense, you want to be the counselor, you know, and a counselor, you know, you go whatever kind of counseling. They don't give you the answer. They don't jump you to the top, right? Whatever problem you've had, believe me, they've heard it 100 different times from 100 different people, right? They already know what the answer is, right? But that's not the point. The point is to guide you to discovery of the answer, right? And so in visual design, if they're asking for all the glitz, then we want to be really good at asking questions about, well, what is it that you really want this to do? Okay, forget about the glitz. What is it that you really want this to do? And then kind of step them through the logic of why simpler may be better for them. Unless it's a marketing piece, right? If it's a marketing piece, like a graph or something, throw it out the door. It's going to be marketing. Yeah.
I just had a question on your chart here. So why you decided not to put the numbers on the, you know, boxes? So
right.
You mentioned in the other slide that so you don't want your eyes to go back and forth. So I was wondering what was it that it didn't make you to?
Because the exact numbers here weren't important. This is part of, this is the lower section of a larger report. And the table of numbers were already presented up above.
I see.
And they were simply duplicating the numbers but using a chart down at the bottom. And I said, I get the point of the chart because you want to glance and see, just give me a shape, right, that I can see. And then I'll go to the numbers if I want more detail.
That tells me there's no acceleration week to week in anything.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we won't get into that. There's
You know,
changes.
In Power BI, there's this terminology issue that we encounter all the time. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But you know, in Power BI, we have the term, you know, dashboards, and we have the term reports, and they sort of mean different things, but your reports actually look like what people think dashboards should look like, and you always have to have this conversation, well, a dashboard in Power BI is a different animal. And so that's a thing in Power BI, but I think there's also a thing in general. We've been talking about dashboards here, and the whole point is information and meaning at a glance.
Exactly.
Right? Yep. But reports, even if they're visual, you know, can go to, you know, much deeper levels of detail, right? And that's the point. You know, you want to maybe in certain reports go down to very deep levels of the data, right?
Right.
So we mix those things up, you know, in the Power BI paradigm, and we do some of both, and the terminology gets confusing.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, and I think what Brian said actually relates more to dashboards, like, don't make me click 4 times, right? If dashboard is like that, like page, I should be able to understand exactly, that's a dashboard for me or for my department. In a report, it's meant to be more interactive, at least in Power BI.
Sure.
You should be able to drill up and down and across. So I think that, good point, Ron, fundamental difference.
Do you feel that bar graphs left to right is faster to intake than vertical?
Then columns.
Yeah, in a column.
I think both work. The reason why I use bars here is simply the orientation of the section, right? It's more landscape, so I made the bars landscape. Also, bar charts have the benefit of, if you've got your titles, right, your legend, if they're like long, then a bar chart works really well, because it's hard to squish it into a column chart, right? Because it just looks ugly. So,
And
yeah.
borders, so you've got 6 graphs there, but no borders defining them.
Right.
White space over borders?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Or if you wanted to put a border, you make it a very faded, because again, it comes back to this iconic memory. Just glancing, your mind doesn't know the difference between a line that's a border and a line that's a chart. It sees a line.
Yeah.
And then you have to go to the next stage to figure that out. So if you don't have a line for a border, it just goes to what's important.
Taking that a little bit further, just for my taste, when I look at the chart, certainly the one on the lower left there, even though the totals are at the top of every one of those columns, that is terribly distracting to me.
Yeah.
Like, I would be able to read that better if those numbers weren't there. I could just simply follow over from the left-hand side, probably a lot more efficiently than with having those numbers there, for my eye.
It
Yeah.
makes me think of trying to count the 5s.
Yeah.
Now there's more
Yeah.
stuff to look at,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you don't need.
Yeah.
So I noticed all these examples, you have one-dimensional displays. Would you consider something like a heat map or a geospatial map too complex for dashboards?
You know, again, the context here was dashboards, and heat maps and things like that is more about data discovery, right? You've got lots of data, but you don't know where to look, so you've got a heat map to kind of help you. So it's a little bit different context, I think, than a dashboard, which an operational manager would be looking at.
If I can add to that too, Stephen, he has a workshop that he's done for years, and he has a great exercise on spatial where he lists like 20 questions and says, should this be spatial or not? And your immediate inclination is to be like, yeah, spatial, everything. But when you actually tease it out, so many of them were actually better as bar charts.
Yeah.
And the things that were more spatially oriented are like, you're looking at a neighborhood and you want to see like the customer distribution on a heat map relative to where the store is. Like, that's truly spatial. But a lot of times, like in our company, tons of people get so excited about the visuals of maps, they just throw everything in there. And meanwhile, it'd be so much more effective as a bar.
Yeah, it is really. It really is about eloquence, not about wordiness, about eloquence.
Well, and you said at the very beginning, this is an operational thing, not a discovery thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I noticed, it took me a while I had to look at this carefully, being new to it, but the totals, to me, should be a different color than the other 5 charts.
Oh, well, that's fair enough. I wouldn't.
I mean, everybody that's looked at it more than once knows that's the total section.
Yeah.
But you have to actually look at it to see it's the total section.
Yeah, that's totally fine. A little bit darker to pull your eye to it.
Something different about it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.